But welcome everybody, and I hope this is a positive experience for you all, and where we would get the information on the ADGA website, how you would fill it out, and the process of getting started on tests that's recognized by the American Dairy Goat Association.
Hope everybody can see the screen. If for some reason you can't, put it in chat so Judi can warn me, because I'm just going to be going through the material and I don't want to get distracted by that. So she's going to help out with that kind of thing. And I am sharing the screen. I see some of you are here by phone, so you may want to come back to the recording later for that. And those of you who are on computer, I hope everyone is seeing that. So ADGA participates in a program that is an overarching program that's Dairy Herd Improvement, DHI. When we add the R to DHIR, that means we're involving the registry. So that's why the two acronyms are that way. So today what we want to talk about mostly is entering on tests, which is the ADGA application, and our test options that we have. The ADGA application for a brand new herd, there is no deadline. I know I see it a lot that it's January 31st, and that's not true, because that's the deadline for renewal herds to keep their records continuing. But a brand new herd really has no deadline. And it's best to not do that until you've worked with your association, and we'll go through that more, and you know your record center, your test plan, your test supervisor if you're going to use one. And so really we don't need to have you apply at ADGA until you dry that first doe off, because that's going to trigger the record to come to us. And if we don't have you in the system, there's not going to be a match and it'll just go into the archive. So the information that we're going to talk about today, and the information that you need in order to process your application, is your DHIA now for association, a herd code, a record center, a test plan, and of course your membership information. For those of you who have already applied, you've seen the form. We have an online system form and a paper form. And what I was hoping to do, and I had it up here earlier, but I'm not seeing it right now, was my other internet, but I don't see that now. So we'll just go through the PowerPoint right now. So this is the information that you're going to need. And what I wanted to do next is to talk about what are the things that you really need to decide first before you even embark on production testing, is choosing your options based upon your goals. So do you want star volume, which is just the star, no other information, or do you want advanced registry, full production information goes on the pedigrees? Do you want to just do management program? Are you interested in having top 10, a breed leader? What kind of costs are you willing to incur? Costs for test supervisor, costs for your laboratory, costs for the records. You need to think about the available time that you have for this, generally once a month. It can be stretched out longer, but it does take time for you to have your tester there or to be testing your own animals. And the misspelled availability of the tester and their time. And that kind of we'll talk about later when we think about the different test plans that you can choose. I'm only briefly going to mention ADGA Plus as it's part of the application. I don't really want to go into the program right now, but you can leave this part blank if you're not doing ADGA Plus, which is a bundling of services that are linear appraisal and prepaid DNA testing. If you're not doing ADGA Plus, just leave that blank. If you are doing ADGA Plus and you're going full bore with everything all at once, I'm not sure that that's a great idea, but some people do it successfully. I know I didn't. But you know, we probably will have another webinar on ADGA Plus. So it's real important to realize what entities are involved in production testing. So I have this cartoon up to talk about the data flow, because really ADGA and you on the farm are in the same boat. We are using the records. So you use the records for your management system. We use the records to do genetic evaluations, to have awards programs, to have top 10. Everything in between is really other entities that ADGA can help you with, but we do not run these programs. So this includes your association, the DHIA. This includes your test lab, who's going to be doing the butterfat and protein components. This includes the record center, which are going to house the records. And so the CDCB then talks with that DRPC, and that's why that arrow goes to them, but it is not going to the farm. CDCB talks to ADGA too, because we provide pedigree information. So that pedigree information then gets tied to the milk record and everything gets matched up. CDCB does have that searchable database that you can use, and that's the Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding. But like I said, their reason to exist is not for you at the farm. It is for the record centers and it is for the registries, because that is how we clean the data for genetic evaluations. So really your relationship is with your DHIA, and it's very important to develop that, get one that you're familiar with or comfortable with, one that answers your needs, is easy to maybe get a hold of if you have questions, especially when you're new. But you also have to realize, and I think this is real important, this system is set up for a huge nationwide dairy cow system. We are a teeny tiny portion of that system. So oftentimes if the personnel at the DHIA sound a little short, remember that we are a drop in the bucket from the total amount of work that they are trying to get done. So I think it's just kind of nice to remember that, and you know, always make sure that you keep that relationship positive, because that DHIA is going to be your friend, and it's going to be more your friend really than ADGA and any of these other entities on this slide. And so with that said, I thought this would be the first time that we should probably talk about any questions you might have. So if you want, let's go.
Nobody's written a question so far, so
Okay.
We're good to go.
So we'll just assume that that was as clear as can be, I hope.
It's as clear as mud.
Clear as mud, that's what we want. Okay, let's see, let me get back to this. All right, one of the first items that's going to be asked for, other than the obvious things such as your name and your membership ID, is a herd code. And what a herd code is a unique number that is assigned to you by your DHIA. It is not assigned to you by ADGA. So at times, and that's why I was saying earlier, it's kind of nice to get this all set up before you send in your application. Do you have to? No. We use your membership ID as a placeholder if you don't have your herd code right away and you've already applied. But we will need to know that herd code before you dry up a doe, because as I mentioned, we get electronic records. If it doesn't find your herd code, it's going to think that you didn't apply with us. So your herd code is an 8-digit number. It is unique. It's assigned by your association based upon your state and your county, and then an individual number. They're not used, you know, they're not replaced very often, if at all. I don't think I've ever seen one that said, oh, it used to be this one and now it's this one. So with 8 digits, they have plenty of room. Like I said, you need to provide that to ADGA once you know it, and then we replace your membership ID if it was a placeholder with your herd code, and that stays the same. Like I said, you can sign up before you get that, but really we're sort of the third step in the process. The first steps being getting your tester situation and getting your DHI in place. because that's then going to have all the information that you're going to need to provide to us that we're going to need to know, and we're going to store in the database. Now, a question that I get a lot from people is, okay, my children and I all have goats in our names, and do we each need a herd code? So a herd unit is one that is all under the same management, and it all gets the same herd code. So you don't have to pay for additional applications. You just put those membership IDs and include them on your application. And it could be a relative. It can be a 4-H'er that has their goats on your property. It could be a friend and you share, the farm situation. We don't really care about the relationship between the animals that are housed on your property or on a property together that's on milk test. So if there are 6 people, you have I know we had a 4-H farm that had, I think, about 10 or 12 members on one herd code. And the reason that we do that is because we use the herd mates for comparison in terms of the evaluation process that's done later. So what we just need to know is to have those membership IDs, and then we assign one of you as the primary person for the contact. So if you and your 8 children all sign up, you would probably be the primary unless you wanted to assign that to one of your children, and the others would get the information, and all of it would go through just fine. But as far as some of the emails and mailings and things like that, it would go to the person that's assigned as the primary. That's how we set it up in our system. But like I said, you don't have to be related to each other. This is not critical. But we do want all animals that are managed together, all will need to be on task. The exception being is if you choose one breed or another breed. But you don't have to pay again for another application. Are there any questions about the herd code and herd management unit?
I have one that somebody if we have a group test formed, do they all need to sign up at the same time?
Okay, that's a good question. You tell us the names of your group. They don't need to sign up at the same time though, because we actually just store that in paper form. We don't put it in the database. We don't contact a group member and ask about a different group member. And so you don't need to sign it all at the same time, but you should all have each other's names similar on your applications if you are a group.
Okay, let me see if that answered her question. Okay, the next question is, how do we find the DHIA group for our area?
I will be going into that, definitely. So we'll wait till that section comes up.
Okay. Anybody else with questions? That's it. I don't have any other questions at the moment.
All right. Okay, so there's some other little details on the form that are asked for. The date of the first expected test. Don't stress over this. It's just informational for us, and it doesn't have to be exact. If you think it's in February, it's February. If you think it's going to be in June, it's June. It doesn't need to be anything exact. The next things that are going to be answered, and we'll go through these in detail, are your test type, your test plan, your record center, and your DHIA. And that's where I'll address that earlier question. So the record center, I think I will handle here. Generally, this is something that is offered by your DHIA. Some DHIAs work with just one record center, and some will offer you options. So that's something that you would talk to them. There are only 4 of them, and when you get your DHI lined up, that's one of the questions that you will need to discuss with them is what record center will be processing my records. For those people out west, generally Amelicor, it used to be called Provo, does a lot of the herds out west, but they also process herds in Pennsylvania. DRMS, Dairy Record Management Services, also does a lot of the herds in the Northwest, I know, as well as through the midsection of the country and on the East Coast. For example, Langston is a DHIA, and some of you may have heard of Langston University in Oklahoma. They have their own lab in their DHIA. They only use one record center, and they use Dairy Record Management Services, DRMS. The form has a drop-down box, and so once you know it, you just pick that one. Like I said, some places, I think Washington DHI, for example, will allow you to choose either DRMS or AmeliCore. So that may be something that you want to ask your DHI manager or representative about, and see what kinds of information come. Look at the sheets, the return sheets, see which ones make the most sense to you maybe. They all do basically the same thing. Some offer you no choice at all. Like I said, Langston, you would be automatically assigned a choice. If you are in the Wisconsin area and you are with AgSource, then everything is done through AgSource. You have no choices there. But it is one of the questions you want to ask your association personnel, because then you can make a decision if you do have a choice. And so I'm going to start with and maybe I'll go back to the DHIA actually. Let me go back. Okay. Finding the DHIA, which is your association, like I said, it can be your very important place to go. ADGA maintains a list of regional associations. That doesn't mean that it is the one that you're going to work with, but it is the umbrella regional association. For example, DHI West, which is in California, actually covers smaller DHIAs that are located in New Mexico, California, and Oregon. And there may even be one in Texas. So it doesn't mean that it's necessarily, going to be that particular one, but that's what we can provide and maintain as a list. The most helpful page, I think, for production testing on the ADGA website is the FAQ section. In that frequently asked questions section, links are provided to everything that I'm talking about: the cartoons, the list of affiliates, other questions, what else? Just a variety of links are on that page. I try to make that the kind of one-stop shopping place. And if you see a question that you don't, is not being answered on that page, just drop me an email and I'll get it on there. I'm adding them all the time, trust me, from reading Facebook. So it's a dynamic place. I try and put that on there and organize it, and it talks about all these things and provides the links. So that we have a page full of the regional affiliates. You would contact them first, and then you would say, is there one that's part of your system that's more local to me? That might be one choice you have. You do not have to use, though, the one that's most local to you. I live in New Mexico, and I still use Fresno in California. There's a herd in Tennessee that still has a California herd code. It just depends what works out for you. What you might want to consider, though, is the transit time if you're not nearby a place. If you're sending it across country, for example, you decide you want to use Dairy 1 in New York, and you live in Oregon, there's going to be some transit issues as far as getting your samples to them. But you don't have to use the one that's the closest to you. You can shop around. Look at their pricing. What do they offer? Are they familiar with goats? One of the things, if they are on that list that we provide, it means they are participating in a program that we pay for at ADGA, which is a quality assurance and control program that we get some assurances that they are working with the goats. Not all of them do. And so you might find an affiliate that's not on that list, and most likely it's one that's not working with goats. So that's a question that you should ask. Again, it's a shopping around kind of deal. And you might call a few of them before you decide, well, these people were really helpful, and they're making it very easy for me. I'm going to go with them. And people will ask me frequently, do I have a recommendation? And everyone's experience and everyone's needs are different. And we do not make recommendations at ADGA. So it is, we put the responsibility on you to shop around, ask people that you know on task, what's their experience been, and that kind of thing before you decide on your DHIA. I hope that answers the question that was asked earlier. If not, we'll cover it again in the next question segment. So we actually break it down into a test type and a test plan. We considered the test type 3 basic areas: a standard, which means that you have a dedicated supervisor and you can use different plans, which we'll talk about next, in that it's not necessarily related to the plan. Group, again, you can have different plans, but in a group situation, some areas call it circle testing, other areas call it ring testing, so you may have heard those terms. The people in the group share the testing responsibilities. So it's a minimum of 3 hertz required because we do not allow what we call reciprocal testing. I can't test Judi and Judi can't test me, and we think that that's fine. We don't allow that. So again, different members in the group may choose a different plan. It's certainly easier if they all settle on the same plan. Group situations can work out well when you're not too far apart and your herd sizes are somewhat similar. Groups fall apart when somebody decides to go commercial and now has 300 goats and everyone else has a handful of goats at home. So that usually doesn't well because those people with a handful of goats are now spending a great deal of time at that commercial situation. So you kind of have to talk with your group as to your goals. You can have more than 3 and give yourself lots of options. I think the biggest group I ever heard of was 9, but most people find it's easier to limit it to 3 and do it that way. So we consider it standard, again, when you have a dedicated supervisor. They're just doing your herd. They might be doing other herds too, but you're not going out and testing anybody. The group testing when you all share. And then the other option that we have, which many people have selected, is the owner sampler. And this is a situation where you do your own testing, you do all of the work, except for your verification test, which as we go through the plans, the test type plans, we'll see that there's different requirements for each, and the verification test is part of that system. So again, these are your 3 basic areas. If you are on standard test, you would not be putting down group members on your application. I know somebody asked me that question yesterday. If you are in group test, then yes, you would be listing those other people in your group. You need to talk to your DHIAs because some of them will allow 1 person in the group to become trained and the others don't need to. Personally, I feel like everyone should go and get do a training, that kind of thing. It helps you understand the program better. But some people are busy, they don't want to, and some DHIAs will allow just your group, your lead person in your group to be the person that takes care of the training issues. So again, you talk to your DHIA because they may have local rules that will work out for you. Okay, any questions about those basic areas of choosing what type of test you're going to go on?
We have one question that I have on the chat. It's, what exactly do you mean by a dedicated supervisor? Is this a tester or someone who just watches the testing to make sure everything is done correctly?
Okay. Well, the test, we interchange the words test supervisor, field supervisor, milk tester, but they are all the same thing. When someone has agreed to be a tester and has gotten the training and has gotten approved by their local association to do that testing, they are now working for DHI. They are not working for you. So they have to follow all of the rules of DHI. They have to explain the program. Not only are they going to your farm and measuring the milk taking the sample, they are supervising. Judy, you may remember Sandy Hank. She said, you are not the supervisor if you are not watching the test. You are supervising the entire process. And you're dedicated because you're working for DHIA to go do that herd. So if I were your supervisor, I would be coming out. I would be doing just your herd that day. You would work out payment either directly with me or through your DHIA, depending on how their system is set up. And I would be doing all of the work. You would be telling me things like fresh dates, dry dates, that kind of thing. But I would be filling out the paperwork. I would be keeping the samples. I would be mailing the samples. I'm basically working, doing all the work for you and getting paid for it in some way. There's a barter system out there. Don't worry about it needing to be monetary, but you do need to process it through your DHIA. But that's what I mean by a dedicated supervisor. Someone is working for the system for you.
And I have another question on that same subject. What if that dedicated supervisor can't do it 1 month? Is it okay for a backup supervisor to do it?
Yes. What isn't okay is for you to do it. If you have chosen that plan, you do not want to have any owner sampler information. But yes, they could find a backup supervisor. They might have somebody that they know. You might know somebody else. You just, again, those are the kinds of things that you just make sure your association's okay with it. Transparency is wonderful in this case, and it's usually fine.
Okay, one more question. Does the supervisor milk the does? I only wish.
Absolutely not, okay? That would be definitely a practice that is different on test day. I do recall I was asked to do a one-day milking competition on a farm. And after agreeing to do it at noon and midnight, those are not my best times of the day, they also said, well, we dam raise, can you milk them? Well, needless to say, that whole thing fell apart. So we didn't do it. But no, you are not responsible for the goats. They are. You are responsible for watching them milk the goats, making sure the goats are who they say they are, getting it on the paperwork.
Okay, this is a follow-up question to your answer on supervisors. Why go through the testing rather than just do owner samplers? Are you the supervisor when going with owner sampler?
When you are an owner sampler, we do not consider you the supervisor because you can't really supervise your own work, okay? So you are an owner sampler. Some people prefer the supervisor because they are doing that work and that paperwork and the mailing, and they're not having to worry about that. Other people, it's difficult to find a supervisor, so it's easier to be owner sampler. But when you are owner sampler, we are not considering you a test supervisor. Now, if you're trained and you're doing somebody else's herd, then you would be their supervisor, but you are not your own supervisor. I hope that's what you're asking.
Okay, and I have one more on this subject.
All right, we're warming up.
Lisa, that group, you said that a group needs 3 supervisors. If there are 2 farms, we cannot be a supervisor for each other. You know, I know you did say that was the case, but let's clarify that one more time.
Right, that is the case. So that's what we call reciprocal testing. 2 people cannot just do each other's herds. That's why we ask that a 3rd herd be involved.
Okay, that ends all the questions that I have at the moment.
Okay, now we're going to get into the hefty part. Okay, so the record plan, the test type plans. So we have a basic plan, which I'll go into the numbers later. I'm just kind of giving the overview now, where the milk weights and the samples are obtained at every milking in a 24-hour period. Okay, so that's sort of what we consider the basic plan. For a long time, this was the only plan that ADGA had in their program. And so if you milk twice a day, once a day, 3 times a day, your supervisor would be there at every milking, okay? So that's kind of the basic plan. We then added other plans over time, And so we have a lot more flexibility for our membership. Sometimes it makes it more confusing because there's lots of moving parts to keep track of. But we have one where we alternate the AM and PM milking with the supervisor and the owner. And I'll get into more detail on that one. We have one that very few people use, but we still offer it, which is every other month. And so in January, Judy would come and test me. In February, I would test. In March, Judy would come back. So it's every other month with the supervisor. Because I think we have one herd in all of ADGA using that plan. It's not, I'll go into it more. And I think there's reasons why people aren't using that particular plan. And then we have our owner sampler plans. And we have a couple of flavors, and I'll go into more detail on that. So here's kind of a cartoon, and these cartoons, again, are on the frequently asked question page on ADGA. If you go to, I think it's one of the very first questions, it actually says the steps for ADGA testing, and then it says the pictorial testing, and there are 4 of these. I'm only doing 2 today. But this is just the general overview in case you forget or want to compare plans and see what they're doing, and I will go into specifics on this. So all the information is in the guidebook. There are a couple of flavors of owner sampler. We'll talk about that more. You sometimes, I think, I haven't heard of any lately, but all plans may not be available to the goat herds at all of the DHIAs. I have not really heard that being a problem any longer. So that's something, but what we do see, if you're at AgSource, for example, they don't really like to code herds as the O2. They code them as the 22. So it's a little bit different. So you have to talk to them about that. But this is just, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's just to kind of say the herd owners choose the plan. You tell us the plan. This is what needs to go on your barn sheets or in your data entry. And it's just kind of an overview of all the plans compared to each other. Okay, so we're going to start out with the old standby test type plan 20. So this is one where your dedicated tester, your supervisor, is coming to both milkings on test day, or 1 milking if you're milking once a day, or 3 milkings if you're milking 3 times a day, but all in a 24-hour period. It qualifies if you meet the minimums in the guidebook, and I'm not going into that today, but the minimums are in the guidebook and they are on the website, for Advanced Registry Stars. So the Advanced Registry Star program is where all the information on that production is stored in the ADGA database. So if you look up performance pedigrees, all of that information is there as to what they milked, how many days they milked, did they earn the star. So all of that gets recorded in the database. Even if they didn't get the star, if they only milked 30 days and you sold them, that will get recorded in the database and go towards lifetime records. So all of that production information on milk amount, butter fat, and protein is stored and goes with the performance pedigree. This also is a plan that is immediately used in genetic evaluations as long as it passes the filters such as being sire identified, etc. Again, a subject for another webinar or 2 or 3. It qualifies for breed leader as long as you meet a data collection rating of 93. Now, I'll briefly go over data collection rating right now, but it is something we don't calculate this. It's calculated at the Council of Dairy Cattle Breeding. It's based on your test type plan, the level of supervision, intervals between tests, and it builds as you test. So on your first day of testing, after that's processed, your data collection rating may only be 23. And then on your second day, it may be 44. And by the 6th or 7th test, it's actually getting into those 90s. But it depends upon, like I said, a lot of variables. If you're owner sampler, it accrues more slowly because there is no supervision being done. If you have a verification test done in there and all of a sudden it is supervised, it jumps it up. If you test kind of infrequently, it's going to take a little bit longer. If you test too often, which you can't test less than 15 days apart, then it might jump a little bit, but it's still going to need those days in milk overall to really get it up into the higher numbers. So for top 10, we just ask that they meet this data collection rating of 93. So it means they've had a lot of supervision, and this is really a very elite award, and so the requirements are a little bit more strict than just for milk stars. So that's why we have included this data collection rating. You do not need a verification test for test plan 20 for milk stars. The only time you need that is when you do have an animal that is eligible for a top 10 award. And then the verification test has to be in place, and that animal's name has to be on the verification test with the information in order for it to be considered for a breed leader. But if you're not in breed leader, territory, your goats are good milkers, but they're not super milkers, you do not need to have a verification test on this plan at all. All of our other plans are going to require a verification test. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that you knew on the 20 that it's not required. So in the O2, the supervisor and the owner share responsibility for collecting those test date weights, but you alternate it in AM and PM. And the reason that you do this, so what would happen is in the morning, I would have Judi would come over and test. I'll start back over again. So again, it's 24-hour period. And the way that it works best is if I did the first weight. So the owner is never doing the sampling. The owner is doing the weight. So I take my weights at 6 o'clock the night before Judy's going to come visit my farm and test me. And I have the weights all ready for her when she arrives to do the second weight in the morning. So she gets that second weight and she takes the entire sample. Then the next time we test, we're going to reverse that. So Judy's not going to come in the morning, she's going to come in the afternoon. We have found, especially with goats, that butterfat varies from morning to afternoon. So that's why we ask that the sampling be done, alternating the AM and PM. That's why we call it an AM PM plan. It is eligible for that advanced registry information in STAR. It is immediately ready for genetic evaluations. Again, it's eligible for breed leader with the same data collection rating, 93. Here's the difference in that verification test. We need the whole herd verified in this situation. Now, if in that 20, if you were just wanting to verify the one doe that was going to be top 10, you could do that. But for a test plan 02, you need to have the entire herd verified. And you can do that at any time on this test plan. We don't recommend that you wait until your goats are practically dry, but we don't require that you do it within a particular time frame. So we do get people who, we remind you in October if it hasn't come in, and people will at the last minute do that. Maybe half their herd's dry, that's okay, just report them dry, but it is the entire herd. So tips on that O2 plan is to plan ahead for that 24-hour period, because if you and your tester agree that you're going to, milk at 6 and 6, but normally you milk at 8 and 8, you want to adjust for that before, so that you have that 24-hour representation. I have found that it works best when the owner has the weight ready for the tester, and not the tester comes and then, oh yeah, I'll call you tonight after I milk. It just works far better, far smoother to have the owner do the first weight, whether it's morning or afternoon, and then they can provide that to the tester. The paperwork's all complete then when the tester leaves the farm. You need to alternate. Do we recognize that occasionally that doesn't happen? Yes, that's okay. But the idea, the intent is to alternate that to get accurate component testing. And this is also planned. It's a little bit kind of fuzzy in the guidebook, I think, but we'd like you to also document that pre-milk test weight and time. What does that mean? So I'm going to actually do my actual test on the evening, tomorrow evening. And so what I want to do is tomorrow morning, I'm going to document my pre-milk test weight and time. That way, if there's any question about was it 24 hours, I have some documentation. It's only if ADGA might ask you for it. And so keep it in a notebook, keep it wherever you want. It doesn't need, do not put it on your barn sheets. Do not worry about it in your other testing information that you do, but just have it in case there's a question that comes up, and then you've got it. And that's what we ask you to do. The test plan 40, certainly a popular plan that many people are doing, partly because of the difficulty in getting testers. This is a plan where the owner weighs and samples each month and is responsible for everything. We ask that the owner sampler do every milking, whether it's 1, 2, 3, and split the sample between that. So that part doesn't really matter, but the owner is going to do everything. They're going to be doing all the sampling, all the weighing, all the paperwork, all the mailing, everything. You get to pick 2 styles. One is the star volume registry star. And this is where the record is reviewed just for applying the star. The production information would not accompany the pedigree. Why do some people choose this? Usually because it's difficulty in getting themselves trained. We ask for the other option, that you have documentation of training. And so people who live in areas where they are unable to get to a training, or they don't have time, they might choose this option because they can at least get the milk stars. So again, that goes back to that early slide where I said, what are your goals? If you're just worried about the star M on your pedigree and not the rest, this could be for you. It does have some other requirements. They have to have a minimum data collection rating of 75 in order for us to review the record for the star. They also have to have a verification test, and that verification test is in a specific time frame that the majority of the herd is in this time frame. You have some animals that are less than 60 or greater than 150, but most of your animals are in that time period. That's fine. The idea is that you are verifying those animals when they are in full function and not waiting until the day before Christmas when they are doing a couple of ounces. The advanced registry volume, as I was explaining before, it has some requirements in order for us to include that full production record. They need to have 240 days in milk on the day of freshening, and they have to have had 8 tests in place. So they don't have that minimum data collection rating, but they do have a days in milk and a test minimum. So that's the difference between the two, and it's important in figuring out. But what we also ask for the AR volume, as I mentioned before, is that you go to a training session and your DHIA provides us documentation, the email, fax, whatever, on their letterhead or signed by them that you have attended that training. You only have to send that in once. It's not every year. So those are the difference. The other difference on the owner sampler is that owner sampler testing requires a history of testing before that record is used in the genetic evaluation system. This generally means 8 tests within the last year, 2 months before freshening. It's a little complicated. The whole system is explained on the FAQ. But basically, if you are testing regularly after a year, then your genetic evaluations will kick in. But there is a delay, and so that's important when people are selecting this. If genetic evaluations were part of your early goals that you're setting, this plan is going to delay that for a little bit. So you have to be willing to put up with that delay, or you may want to choose a different test plan. If your goal was for breed leader, then this is not a plan that's eligible for breed leader. The board of directors, when approving these alternate plans, were kind of specific in what they could be used for. This one is not for breed leader recognition. And the annual herd verification is required when the majority of the herd is that 60 to 150 day mark. Some tips on the owner sampler or some notes. I have found that this is a plan that works best for those who are committed to year-round testing. Those who want to maybe milk 3 or 4 months and test 3 or 4 months, this plan is not going to do much for you. It'll give you some information. It's probably not going to get to the DCR you need. It's not going to have a test history for genetic evaluations. And so generally, when I talk to people about the use of this plan, it's for those who really kind of are believing in the whole system of milking during the full lactation. Records have to be sent in when the lactations are complete for the star volume. Our programming isn't set up right now for us to do this any other way. However, for advanced registry, the doe pages do not need to be sent in. For those not on tests yet, you will be getting what we call doe pages or individual animal pages back that you would send in to us, scan or whatever, and we would review that record for the ST. Now, if you select advanced registry and 8 of your goats made that 240 days and 8 tests, and that's all fine, and they went through electronically, but one of them freshened a little bit later, but her DCR is 75 and she meets the minimums, then you send in that page and we'll review it for the STAR program. So it doesn't, you don't lose, you don't have to pick one or the other and think that you're going to lose something if you can't milk some of the goats that 240 days. Many associations require owners to attend that tester training, and we certainly recommend it. I was talking with Judi earlier, and what I do is Owner Sampler is really a great program, and it works really well for those people who have been on other test plans before, are very familiar with the program, and decide for whatever reason that Owner Sampler works out for them. Owner Sampler also works really well if you have a good mentor that knows the system. But often Owner Sampler can be frustrating because there's a lot of in and outs with working with your record center and getting everything done correctly so that the records are processed correctly. That if you don't go to training and you just jump in and think that it's fine and it's easy, that's usually a recipe for failure. And again, Owner Sampler for advanced registry requires that one-time documentation of training. I imagine there will be questions.
Okay. Yes, we have a few questions. One is, why are owner samplers not eligible for top 10?
As I mentioned, because there is very little supervision, the board of directors did not feel that that met the level, the bar necessary to be eligible for one of our highest awards.
Okay, if you are owner sampler, can you opt to have more than one verification test?
If you want to do that, yes, you can.
Okay, what is the difference between a verification test and a regular milk test while on a standard plan?
Okay, the verification test, and we weren't really going to cover that, so I'll just be brief here. But the verification test involves third-party validation. So you have to have someone else who's a tester involved in that verification test in combination or by themselves with your regular tester. All of those are on the forums. There's a supervisor's guide to the verification test on the website. It doesn't matter what test plan you are on. It is 3 supervised milkings. The pre-milking is done, and then the 2 milkings during the 24-hour period. If you're milking once a day, one of those milkings is 0. So, but it's 3 supervised tests, whereas your regular day is just going to be your supervisor 2 times. But it's going to involve another person besides your regular tester.
Okay, the next one is star volume. Is there an average time frame that a doe is in milk during which she can qualify for her star?
The data collection rating is based upon monthly testing. We do not have that system. We cannot follow it. It depends too much. There's too many variables in there for me to give you an answer. You can follow that data collection rating by going to that Council on Dairy Cattle Breeding site and looking at, they provide it there with the record. So you can follow how that is going. Usually, rule of thumb, at least 6 tests, probably 30 to 40 days apart, with a verification test in there. But you know, you don't want to chance it and think, oh, it's 6 tests, and then you go in and see that you have a 72. So we don't control that calculation. So the best thing is to follow your records and see how that's accruing over time.
Okay, I'm on owner sampler. I understand that all does in a herd have to be on test. However, if I have a doe that I don't care about testing and would prefer to let her dry off when she has weaned her kids, do I need to actually start milking her?
You know, that is a question that's best handled by your DHIA because there are differences between the record centers. One record center has a code where you can put that it's nursing. Others don't have that code. And so it's best to ask them what's the best way to do that. But lots of animals, you know, you can, if they're nursing and you talk to your tester and you talk to your DHIA, it's okay, then just put them down as 0. You have to enter them on tests, but you're going to put them down at 0. Now, if you were actually a commercial dairy, this might hurt you because you would be looking at rolling herd averages and things like that. But for most of us who are not in that situation, your rolling herd average is only informational because they would look at those 0 and they would add her average in there as 0. If you're Provo, a Millicor, you can put nursing. So you just need to kind of talk to your system to figure out the best way to do that.
Okay, another one. What if you want to do milk tests, but keeping does in milk for 240 days may not work for your schedule? Do you recommend a test plan for that?
That's a loaded question for me. So I'll give you my opinion first, and then I'll tell you what the answer is. Milk testing is designed for full lactations to see what your animal is doing. It is not really, it's for management purposes, information, genetic evaluations. The awards are nice, they're fun, they look good on your pedigrees and that kind of thing. But to me, milk testing is a program that you're doing because you're somewhat dedicated to the information for the full use of the program. That said, if you can't keep your goats on test for that 240 days, but you think they're going to milk enough to get a star, you know, in 120 days, then you would pick a test plan, one of the other test plans.
Okay, and then one more. So if you're on owner sampler and you opt to have more than one verification test, does it increase your DCR?
Yes, anytime you add supervision to your test, it's going to make the DCR jump.
And those are the only questions I have for this section.
I will add one thing because it's okay to do those verification tests and jump. What is not okay, and I just want to stress it, we get real messed up if you change your test type plan mid-lactation. If you start out owner sampler and change to a plan later, it can be very tricky as to whether we're going to be able to accept the records. So that becomes kind of my call. If you've had 8 supervised tests and 1 owner sampler, I'll probably accept it. If you've had half and half, I won't. So kind of know ahead of time that you're going to commit to that plan for the year. You can change in the following year, but during those lactations, changing from owner sampler to one of the other test plans can not be the best idea.
That was the follow-up question just came. Can you still change your plan before lactation starts?
Yes. So if you've already signed up and you picked owner sampler, and after this talk you decide, oh, I'm going to change my plan, you just let us know. Just call us, email us, no problem.
And I think that's it.
Okay. I'm going to briefly go. I don't think anybody is really in this situation, so I'm going to be very brief. We do have some other test type plans. 23, generally we consider that for a commercial herd. You would have a bulk tank. You would be having somebody coming and picking up your milk. You would be working with a creamery. It's available. It has different things that it's available, awards are available for it, like advanced registry. However, for a top 10 award, you have to have that individual animal verified. You can't verify an individual on a bulk tank comparison. And a bulk tank comparison is something that the creameries do. I'm not going to really get involved with that. If you have questions about it, or if it's a plan that appeals to you, just give me a call, drop me an email, and we can talk about how that works. We do have a number of commercial herds, mostly in the Midwest, that are using this plan. One in California. So there are a couple that do this because it's a little bit easier because you don't have to have that quite the level of supervision, and that bulk tank comparison is something that you're doing anyway. So that's all the time I'm going to spend on that one. The every other month, which I mentioned before, and it is advanced registry and genetic evaluations. It's not eligible for breed leader, and also an annual herd VT is required. The reason that we have difficulty with this plan being used for breed leader is especially in the area of components. Goats have quite a bit more variability in their component levels than cows do. And so not having samples for, except for every other test plan, doesn't really give us enough data points to really meet that bar that is a little bit high for that breed leader, and that's why. And so most people don't choose this, and especially with the flexibility now of you don't have to test every 30 days. You can stretch it out to 40, 45. There's no rule about this. I know people think there is, but there isn't. So, with that flexibility, the other plans are fine. So there's really very little reason to choose this particular plan anymore. Now we'll go into the test supervisors as to who can be one, who trains and approves, and all that kind of thing. So generally, test supervisors are approved by your association. So you need to talk with them. Some places say, no, we only are going to assign you a supervisor. This happens, AgSource is actually quite strict about this. Others say, your neighbor's fine. We'll train your neighbor or your friend, whatever. Somebody else that has goats that a high school FFA kid who's looking for an interesting project. But the approval, the ultimate approval and training comes from your association. It doesn't come from ADGA. Can this person be, I'll just always put it right back and say, you need to talk to your association manager. They're the one who says it's okay. Can I use one who's been trained in a different association? Again, talk to your association manager. They're the ones that are going to make this decision for you. Most of them are quite happy to have you find a friend or somebody else to do this for you, because it's difficult to fit in a herd with 4 animals into their regular cow testers' schedules. Sometimes they can because they're near a dairy or something like that. Most of them are fine as long as you talk with them and agree upon the training, how they're going to get paid, that kind of thing. So that covers who trains and approves. How to find one, that's harder. ADGA does not keep a database. Occasionally, your DHIA may know people in the area. I think this is one of the most successful uses of Facebook that I've seen. Is anybody in my area willing to do this? And oftentimes it seems like that works out. And I think that's one of the great ways that social media can come and help. Then, as we mentioned earlier, especially if you're going to be needing a verification test, you need to make sure you have 2 people signed up, because you need your regular person and you're going to need that person who's going to be involved in your verification test. Generally speaking, your tester should be able to drive. So a lot of times, they say, well, I'm 14, can I do it? If you're a parent or somebody is willing to drive you there for whatever that obligation is, that's fine. But oftentimes that might be too young and your association might not approve it. I have seen situations where there was a 14-year-old doing the testing and they were absolutely wonderful at it and very dedicated. So it just depends, and you just work that out with your association. It can't be anybody that's related to you. It can't be anyone who has a financial interest in your herd. Does this mean you can't sell them an animal? No, it's a financial interest in your herd. So are you selling milk and, you know, they own half the animals, you know, co-own the animals with you, they cannot be your tester. They're your employee, they cannot be your tester. So anybody who has some sort of financial interest in your herd cannot be. A family member cannot be. It really needs to have that somewhat independence of, because they are not working for you, they're working for the DHI, and we don't want to put them in that position of being questioned because there was some relationship. And that's part of the code of ethics. That's a national code of ethics. So my last slide, and we'll have questions after this too, but my last slide is where to find this information. So there's, as I mentioned, you know, with that first cartoon, there's a lot of entities all involved in this. So there's multi-layered. So of course, ADGA, if you're in doing DHIR, then you have to follow ADGA's rules. And those are in the guidebook. Guidebook's online. That FAQ page, which is on the website, I think, like I said, if you don't find the answer there, let me know. I don't want to get, you know, so that we have 150 million questions on there, but if it's something that I think, oh, wow, that's something we really should cover, then I'll put it up there. But it's a good place to start. And a lot of times when people ask me questions, I'll write back, give them the link and say number 22. So I'm really trying to get people to use this site. We also have our standard operating page, which is on the website for dairy goat production testing. This also answers a number of questions that are specific to goats. The local rules, that would be your DHIA, whether they're really local or whether it's just the group that you're participating with, but get to know your association. They may have some rules. We have a very good relationship, for example, with Idaho DHIA, but the manager there really wants to be the one that's contacted before you contact ADGA. So, and there's some things that they do a little bit differently. We would say it's okay at ADGA, but they don't do it that way there. So you must also know your local rules and get to know your manager. Give them a bar of goat soap every now and then, something like that. We are also part of the National DHI program, as I said, which is a long-established program designed for cows that we fit into. They have the overarching rules for all testing, as in how many days fresh before I can test, what animals have to be tested, do I have to do all breeds, that kind of thing. So they have on their website, which is just National DHIA, and I didn't include the links here, but they are all on that FAQ page, have the uniform operating procedures, which cover everything that the cows do. Some of the specifics aren't there for goats. That goes back to that SOP page for ADGA. But they also have the code of ethics for your testers and for participating in the program, because we want people to use this program to provide good information both for you, for the registry, for the national herd, which is our genetic evaluation program. So all of these are places for you to get information. They'll all have something a little bit different, a lot of pieces to put together. But I think that when people take the time to read the documents and kind of understand, then it really can help. So I would encourage everybody to go to that FAQ page and follow every link that's on there and do their homework before they start testing, and refer back to it when they are testing. So this is our last opportunity for questions, and if there are any, we'll take them.
We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Somebody asked, my girls are due in the next week. Can I still sign up? Should I?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So we do have, I know that there is some conflicting information that I see out on social media about testing, and you can actually start testing at any time. Now, I'm going to follow up with some warnings about that. So if your girl's fresh and you can't get everything together for another month, that's fine. You'll test once you get everything set up, and you'll be 40 days down the road. That's okay. but you will have missed some critical data points because butterfat is high at the beginning, and that kind of sets the calculation, the calculus for determining the amounts, because we're just collecting data points, so it's calculus, it's the area under the curve. And you'll miss some of those early data points. The other thing that can happen is if you wait 90 days before your first test, which is okay, we'll still use the record for milk stars if they qualify, you won't have a genetic evaluation, again, because they miss critical early data points. So those are the only things about waiting. But yes, you could still sign up now and be fine.
Okay, I think you answered this, but we'll double check. How do you find a supervisor if you pick a plan that requires one?
Yeah, I did kind of cover it. I said, well, that is something that we don't keep track of at ADGA. We don't have a database. The association that you work with may have that information. They may be able to suggest people. You can ask your director, your ADGA directors in that area. The ADGA directory has a list of herds that are on tests in your area, so you can contact somebody nearby and ask them who they're using. You can, again, like I said, a good use of social media. Go out there. There's a couple of different production testing lists if you're not on them already, and somebody will say, I live in Timbuktu. Is there anybody near me that could be my supervisor who's willing to take the test? So there's various ways to try and do that. It is effort on everyone's part, but you ask your neighbor, ask your friend, ask, I know some of my best friends have been through milk testing.
Okay, does a third party for the VT have to have the same training like a supervisor?
Again, your DHIA approves all the people who are doing the testing. Some DHIAs, at a minimum, they have to be trained and approved by your DHIA. Some have more stringent requirements saying that they have to have been testing for a minimum amount of time. So again, that is the question for your association manager.
Okay, is the genetic evaluation the same as the Superior Genetics Award? One of my does may qualify and
Oh, sorry, Judy.
Okay, one of my does may qualify and I want to make sure I'm picking the right plan.
Okay. You need to pick a plan that says it's good for genetic evaluations. All right. So all of them are, but owner sampler requires a history first. You also have to be on linear appraisal because superior genetics is not the same as a genetic evaluation. It's a combination of both the genetic evaluation for milk testing and the genetic evaluation based upon the linear appraisal program. So you need to be in both programs in order to be considered for superior genetics. And superior genetics would
I have a couple more.
Another topic for us sometime.
Okay, just to reiterate, to get the superior genetics, you have to be on both linear and DH and a test plan.
Right.
Okay. And then my DHIA said I could not test my does that freshened in November because it was past 6 weeks. So do I dry them and rebreed, or are they just not included in my herd sheet?
That is a fairly unusual, I hope that you were understanding them right. And so what I would suggest on that one is to send me an email privately with your DHIA information, and I will contact them.
Okay, and do you start testing from the first day they give birth to get those vital first data points?
Again, the Uniform Operating Procedures says that you have to test, I think, by the 5th day. If you test earlier than that, you will clog up the machines with colostrum. So you're actually waiting until the colostrum clears. But what you want to do is to test in those first couple of weeks and then bring them on as they freshen. But sometimes you might send a sample and your lab will make that determination that it's too fresh to test. They look at it and go, this is going to wreck my machine.
Okay, and I have signed up for owner sampler. If my first doe freshens March 15th and I do my first test with her on March 30th, but then my next few does freshen on April 3rd, is my next test date automatically April 30th?
You select your test interval. Now, those of you who are using or may have seen Provo, Amelicor's barn sheets, they use a paper barn sheet. They have probably 1 million copies left. And so they are back in the days when they used to say before 45 days or after 60 days. Don't even pay attention to that. Test interval is your choice.
I want to clarify just for my own. So if a doe freshens tomorrow, the first, in our local association, the first 5 days, she's considered too fresh to test. So I would, if I tested today, she would not be eligible to be tested. But if I tested next week, 5 days later, she is eligible.
Right, that's right.
Okay. All
So
right.
in the case of waiting, you know, March 30th or whatever you said, and you thought it would be April 30th or something, no, you can pick a different date. It doesn't have to be exactly 30 days apart.
Okay. Do we have does freshening this week? Is it okay for the first test to be February 16th?
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds great. Any other, I asked if there's any other questions and I'm not seeing, oh, okay. I have a doe freshening on Tuesday. Should I test tomorrow?
That's up to you. If you have other does that, you know, you want that information to be in there, then test tomorrow and then pick her up the next time you test.
Okay, there's a good follow-up question with this one.
Okay.
So I may be sending samples from different does in at various times during each month, depending on when they freshen.
That's right. Once they freshen and you're testing them, you would always be sending a sample on that doe until you dry them off. But as they are coming into milk, test, you know, in your February test, maybe you have 3 samples, and in your March test, you have 6, and by April, you have 30.
So you don't keep sending tests in as they freshen, you just test basically once a month.
You just pick them up on your next scheduled test.
Okay, I'm hoping that, I think that answered that question.
Okay.
If 2 people get certified, can they do the first plan for each other? We already answered that, no.
Right, no.
Then get a 3rd person to do the verification, no. Not on test, not on standard test.
Right.
Okay, I have somebody who said they sent the question to me privately. Did I get it? I'm gonna go back up. Oh, I missed a question here.
Okay.
When registering with DRMS, is this something that the DIHA sets up, or do I need to contact them directly? I have had trouble getting this set up at this point.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, your DHIA is your point of contact. You're going to ask them what record centers do they use. They're going to set that up as part of that system. You do not work directly with the record center. Now, you can call the testers, or the owner samplers can call the record center if there's a problem with the records that are coming through. But the selection of the record center and how that system works is dealt with by the DHIA.
Okay, so just to recap that one, I know this is Lauren specifically, you would contact your DHIA center, they contact the DRMS center, your data processing center, and make sure that's functioning.
Right, so how this works is your association is going to be your central location for you getting the information to them, and then they are going to get the information to the record center, which they may be in the lab. So they're all going to coordinate that for you. They're also going to be your billing center. So they're going to be billed by the record center, and then, you know, your whole bill is going to come to you from your DHIA. In most situations, this is how it's working. So that's why you would talk to them about the record center and about the process that they're going to be using, because that's going to take care of all your expenses related to your records. You may end up paying the lab separately or in a bundle. Again, all of them are different. This is why we can't put this kind of thing on the website, because everyone, and there's many more than just the affiliates, handle all of this billing and coordination differently.
All right, Lisa, you have done an amazing job with this. And I know that this is your Sunday afternoon, and I really want to thank you on behalf of the Production Testing Committee that you are willing to do this for us on technically your day off. So we appreciate it. I just asked if there was any open questions, and so far all I'm seeing is appreciation for you.
Well, and thank you, Judy, for coordinating the questions. I think that worked out very nice. Thanks for everyone for attending. I'm going to stop the recording soon, but hopefully we will have this available and along with the PowerPoint. And I really appreciate everyone wanting to do this and for Production Testing Committee to kind of push it. So that's great. Thank you.
Okay, I think this is going to sign us everybody off, but Lisa and I appreciate you all attending, and good luck with your testing. It's fun to have the information. I think you will enjoy the program.
And just always remember that we have Penny Albert, Donna Albee, and myself ready and willing to answer questions and help you through the process.